So first, let's go into PyCharm and stub out the controller for our REST API. And REST controllers are basically the same as any other controller. The real big difference is that they return data rather than HTML. And it's usually in the form of XML or JSON. In this case, we're using the built-in Django response, JSON response, to format a dictionary as a JSON string and return that as the data set. The other main difference that we have with this controller as to other controllers is that we've decorated it with the API view decorator and the authentication classes decorator. The API view decorator allows us to set the HTTP methods that this endpoint accepts. In this case, we're going to support both GET and POST. And the authentication classes allows us to enable token authentication so that we can programmatically authenticate against this endpoint. Both of these decorators come from the powerful Django REST framework. We're only using the tip of the iceberg of this framework. If you have a large API, you should really consider building it out using the Django REST framework. The next thing we need to do is go and add a new URL map for our new controller. I'll just paste it here in app.py. And this is the same as with any other controller. We give it a name and an endpoint. And we point it at the controller function that handles it. I'm going to make the decision to nest all of our REST API endpoints under the URL API so that they're organized all in one location, as it were. Let's go test this out in the web browser. To make it a little easier, I'm going to copy this portion of the URL, API get times series, and replace the viewer portion of the URL with that. It returns a 404, page not found. And this is because we haven't provided any authentication headers, and because it's decorated as an API endpoint, it doesn't get the authentication information that tells the other pages that we're logged in, like the map viewer, for example. It recognizes that we're logged in, but our API endpoints will not. This is why we need to use a tool like Postman that will allow us to configure things like authentication headers and parameters easily. So let's go ahead and set up Postman so that we can start testing.